priests. It corresponded with the feminine principle. The worship of the phallic symbol was said to have begun in Egypt, which is partly true. The exoteric story is that it originated from the lost member of Osiris by Typhon, which was the exoteric symbolism of day losing by night. The bisexual ecclesiastic priests and ancients worshipped this symbol even though they were being conned. The Jews worshipped the penis as well, which in Jude chapter 3 speaks of them serving Baal and the groves, Baal spelled B-A-A-L. The latter term, groves, is translated to Asherah, which means phallus. To perfect the circle in the religion of Baal, a dot, which is the phallus, needs to be placed inside the yoni. You can see the symbol in the corporate logo of Target, of the phallus embedded within the yoni. More modern versions of this symbol can be seen in the Masonic emblem, as well as the communist sickle and hammer, which is derived from Norse mythology of the Jolnir, which translates to Ham, Mer. Before the emergence of Buddhism, Zoroastrianism was the first religion after the primitive religions, which was after the last deluge. Zoroastrianism was formerly labeled Magi from magis, which is a root word of magic, image, and imagination, which all resemble the formation of generation, gene of some sort. Generation, or genesis, is synonymous to regeneration, and that to the generative principle. Resurrection is another allegory of reincarnation, all symbolizing the sexual nature of religions. The reign of magism existed thousands of years prior to the Roman eras, Zoroaster conquering his reign more than 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Zoroaster existing prior to the Proto-Elamite civilization, which was in 3000 BC, promulgated the duality of good and evil in forms of Ahriman and Oromazis, the former being the principle of evil and the latter being the principle of good, which is the first duality ever created after the deluge. The Christian ideology of creator, forming the world through the word, was adopted by the Zoroastrian philosophy of creation by Oromazis, the light bearer, which created the word through speech, also known as logos. Oromazis, also known as Ahura Mazda, is the literal origin of the corporate name Mazda. Mazda translates to female and truth, or simply the feminine principle. Oromazis, Ahura Mazda, or Ormuzd, is said to be born first from time. The esoteric dogmas state Ormuzd performed the creating process after his image and likeness. He created 6 disciples who were the messengers of his truth that communicated with the profane, the commoners. The 6 disciples are now coded as genies, when in antiquity referred to generation due to the root word gen. The mythologies kabbalistically put forth the creation of the world by Ormuzd under 6 periods, which is the same order to be found in Genesis. And of course, this is not a coincidence. All of these points are interconnected, and they equate to their major agenda, which is termed the Great Work. Saint Augustine, which saint can be arranged to Nazi if you just move the letters around, was from the land of Hippo, because as the phonetic suggests, he was a hypocrite. Saint Augustine was a Christian theologian, quoted to have said in the Scottish Review, Volume 7 of 1886 publication, and I quote, "What is now called the Christian religion existed among the ancients and was not absent from the beginning of the human race until Christ came in flesh, from which time the true religion, which existed already, began to be called Christianity." The primitive religions Augustine referred to was of Egyptian origin, which them too originated their teachings from an ancient source. The castes of priests among the Egyptian eras were the sole public controllers of that time. The pharaohs then were mainly disposable puppets put in front of the slaves for the great show, as Francis Bacon said under the pseudonym of Will I Am Shake the Spear. Life is a stage. Plato, a Grecian philosopher viewed as merely a child in the intellectual sense by the Egyptian priests, fancied the governmental system that was idealized, calling this city of control the city of God. The Republic, hence Plato's Republic, was merely a guide to a utopian system for the elites and no one else. The commoners will be sold, of course, in the future. The idea that future utopias exist for them, the commoners, which is actually cannot be furthest from the truth. You will find in your studies that those elect scholars, typically in antiquated books, spill the truth to the public. One example being is of how the priestly caste professed exoteric doctrines while they worshipped their own esoteric doctrines. The initiates that were administered by the priests during ceremonies were only slowly revealed their esoteric doctrines after great examination. Of course, what this means is that they had to make sure the initiate was a willing slave, capable of giving up dignity and morality in exchange for physical pleasure. Osiris is neither a person nor a symbol of the sun in all respects. Osiris is a title as per se, Sir and Lord. Osiris is derived from Iswara, which is linked to Brahma, translating also henceforth to Supreme Lord. Osiris is a title ascribed to the grand architect of the universe by Freemasonry, which is elucidated in public and private quarters. The 2009 film Mr. Nobody reveals the Masonic reference to the grand architect of the universe, of course being a symbolic icon of regeneration. If you have not seen the film Mr. Nobody, it is suggested you do so for mainly the symbolic studies. Freemasonry and ancient mysticism veil their ideologies under naturalistic dualities. For example, Osiris is said to have been killed by Typhon, which is another word for Python. It symbolizes Python of the mud raising vapors to blind Osiris. Apollo, which is equivalent to Osiris since both are the sun, shot his arrows at Typhon, which is symbolic of him casting the rays of light to the people once more. Osiris, the sun, has his energy cut into 14 pieces, to which Isis attempts to relocate. This is symbolic of the average 14 to 15 days required for a full moon to appear after the next. Isis is said to be a female, yet that is only half of the truth. Isis is a hermaphrodite. Her name is equated to Ashtaroth, which translates to pillar, which is the symbol of a phallus. When Isis was looking for Osiris's phallus, she was actually looking for her own. The reason is simple. A true hermaphrodite can regenerate itself. To the commoners, Isis is generally symbolized as the moon, which is the depiction of the feminine